When you hear the word auction, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For me, it's, the sound of a gavel, a fast-talking auctioneer, maybe a dusty old warehouse.
Yeah, that's the classic image, a very physical, very localized kind of event. The smell of old cars and maybe some spilled coffee.
Exactly. But if that's still your picture of the salvage vehicle industry, you are missing one of the biggest high-tech and, frankly, most profitable logistics stories of the last couple of decades.
We are doing a deep dive today into a company called Copart. And they didn't just change that model, they completely shattered it. They took this business of damaged, salvaged, wholesale cars.
Stuff most people would call junk.
Right, exactly. And they transformed it into this massive multinational digital empire. So our mission today is to really unpack that. How did this company, which started over 40 years ago, use technology to go from just 4 local lots to being the dominant global player?
It's fascinating because Copart is so much more than a junkyard, for lack of a better word.
Right.
They are this essential but almost invisible piece of the entire global automotive world.
Totally. They're the machinery that deals with the inevitable friction of the industry, the accidents, the floods, the cars that just reach the end of their life.
And before we go any further, we have to just wrap our heads around the scale of this operation.
Yeah.
Because it's not a small niche company.
Not at all. We're talking about a financial titan. If you look at the projected 2025 data, Copart's annual revenue is a staggering $4.65 billion.
$4.65 billion.
Billion. And that's not even the whole story. Their net income is projected at $1.55 billion, with total assets over $10 billion.
Okay, just stop right there for a second. There is such a cognitive dissonance in those numbers. A multi-billion-dollar company, right?
Yeah.
That gets listed alongside giants we all know, like Amazon or Microsoft.
And their primary business is dealing in assets that, the average person literally considers trash. Damaged cars, totaled vehicles.
It just doesn't seem to fit.
Well, that financial profile is so important because it's what tells us what Wall Street thinks. This isn't some quirky, overlooked stock. They've been on Fortune's 500 list, their 100 fastest growing companies list.
And they're a component of both the Nasdaq-100 and the S&P 500.
Exactly. So their valuation, it reflects the power of their technology and their logistics platform.
Yeah.
It's not just about the scrap value of the cars they move.
Okay, so let's unpack this. That's the central question, right?
Yeah.
How does a company whose core product is distressed physical property, how does it achieve the status of a major S&P 500 tech player?
And the answer, really, is a disciplined two-phase strategy. It wasn't one single brilliant idea.
Okay, what are the 2 phases?
First, they had to establish unmatched physical scale, just pure brute force physical presence. And then second, they executed this. Complete, uncompromising digital revolution that changed everything.
So let's chart that path. We have to start with the concrete, literally, the foundation they laid back in the 1980s.
Our story begins in 1982. The salvage market in California is highly competitive, but also incredibly fragmented. Lots of small, local players.
Right, and this is where the founder, Willis J. Johnson, comes in. He's 34 years old, and he starts Copart in Vallejo, California.
And from what the sources say, Johnson's approach was, classic entrepreneurial aggression. He saw the huge limitations of that existing regional model.
Let's talk about what that model was. If you're an insurance company back then, and you have a totaled car in, say, Sacramento, what happens?
Your local claims department has to call around to a bunch of local independent salvage yards. The buyer pool for that car is basically anyone who can drive there.
So dismantlers, rebuilders, but only within, what, a 50-mile radius maybe?
That's it. It's incredibly inefficient. So Johnson immediately focused on scaling up. He used private loans and equity to finance this really aggressive but still geographically focused expansion.
And that capital strategy is so key here. In this business, land is everything. Storage capacity is the physical bottleneck.
It is. If you want to grow fast, you need cash. You need liquidity right now to buy up huge pieces of land that are suitable for storing thousands of cars and holding options.
So he uses these private funds to lay the groundwork. And by the early 1990s, he's grown from 1 location to 4, all strategically placed across Northern California.
And that concentration is important. It let them maximize their regional efficiency, streamline their operations. It was the base camp for the national assault.
And that national acceleration really kicks into high gear in 1994. That seems to be the watershed year for them breaking out of California.
It was. They started adding 8 new facilities outside of their home state, pushing into Oregon, Washington, and most importantly, they made a really big concerted push into Texas.
Why Texas? It's a big market.
A huge market, but the move wasn't arbitrary. It all culminated in one critical acquisition that just redefined their ambition. They bought the North Texas Salvage Pool of Dallas.
And that was a big deal at the time.
It was the biggest deal. The source material is very clear about this. It was the largest volume seller of salvage vehicles in the entire U.S. at the time.
So this wasn't just buying another lot. This was like buying the Grand Central Station of salvage cars.
Exactly. They were buying the industry leader's inventory flow in a critical geographic hub. By absorbing the biggest player, they weren't just expanding their footprint, they were immediately rocketing their profile to a national level.
It's like a signal flare to all the major insurance carriers.
A huge one. It tells them, hey, we are the primary, serious alternative to this broken, fractured local auction model you've been dealing with for decades.
But that kind of move, buying up all that land, buying your biggest competitor's entire book of business, that takes a level of capital that you probably can't get from private equities or bank loans alone.
And that is precisely what drove them to the IPO, the initial public offering. On March 17, 1994, Copart goes public on the Nasdaq-100, ticker symbol CPRT.
Do we know the details of the offering?
We do. They offered 2.3 million shares of stock at $12 per share. And that event, that infusion of public cash, gave them the war chest they needed.
Not just to pay for the recent expansion, but to fund this multi-year strategy of just total national dominance.
And once they had that liquidity, the growth just exploded. In May of 1995, so just over a year after the IPO, Copart makes another massive acquisition. They buy the NER Auction Group.
And the impact of that deal?
It instantly doubled their number of facilities across the country. Doubled overnight.
So we're seeing a clear pattern here. They're not just building from scratch. They're buying established volume, existing infrastructure to just shorten the timeline to get nationwide coverage.
That one acquisition, NER, catapulted them from a regional player to a sprawling national competitor, and they didn't even pause to catch their breath.
Right. The sources say between July 95 and July 96, they just kept going, founded 6 more new locations, plus a bunch of smaller acquisitions.
Just strategically filling in all the gaps in their coast-to-coast network. And then, once they had that physical presence everywhere, the strategic pivot happens.
This is where it gets really interesting. They shift from just acquiring property
to securing regional and, much more importantly, national contracts with the big insurance carriers. State Farm, Geico, Allstate, you name it.
And this is the definitive move. This is what builds the moat around their business.
It's everything. Because think about it. When an insurer declares a car a total loss from a wreck, a hailstorm, a flood, that process has to be instantaneous and frictionless for them.
They'd want to make a dozen phone calls.
Exactly. By securing these national contracts, Copart becomes the default destination. They're pre-contracted. The optimized choice for that distressed asset, no matter where in the country the accident happened.
So if a Geico customer totals their car in Florida, Geico doesn't have to call 3 local auction guys and get quotes.
Nope.
They have one partner, Copart. Standardized paperwork, standardized logistics, and a guaranteed facility nearby ready to pick up the vehicle. This consolidation of inventory flow is their true competitive advantage.
This relentless growth, I mean, the acquisition-fueled, contract-driven strategy, it had to have a clear result.
It did, a very measurable one. By 2003, Copart hit the 100 location mark across the country, 100.
So they successfully built the massive physical giant first. The foundation was set.
A giant built on acres of concrete and steel. But that was only the stage for the real revolution, the one that was about to happen online.
And this is where it gets really interesting for me. This is where the story shifts from, real estate and logistics to pure platform technology.
It's a huge shift. You have this incredibly successful, geographically massive company,
Right.
but it's still operating in a very traditional way.
Physical auctions, bringing local buyers to look at local cars on local lots. But back in the late 1990s, Willis Johnson had this foresight. He recognized that their biggest limitation wasn't land anymore. They had 100 locations. It was the inefficiency of the physical auction process itself.
It's a visionary move, really.
Right.
He understood that managing 100 different locations, hundreds of thousands of cars, with paper trails and different local systems, it was a huge cost center. a massive drag on efficiency.
The bottleneck had shifted. It wasn't about getting the cars anymore. It was about processing the information about the cars.
So in 1997, they make their first big tech move. They launch an internal system called the Copart Auction System, or CAS.
And we really can't overstate how foundational CAS was. It wasn't just some simple inventory database. You have to think of it as an enterprise-wide resource planning system built from the ground up, specifically for salvage logistics.
So what did it do, practically speaking?
It unified the entire business. It centralized all the essential functions. Standardized vehicle intake forms, digital photos and condition reports, tracking the title processing, generating detailed financial reports.
For both their own facilities and for the sellers, the insurance company.
Yes. It fundamentally digitized the paper trail. It meant every single one of those 100 locations, no matter how remote, operated under the exact same measurable digital protocols.
And by creating that centralized digital view of their massive physical inventory, that unlocks the next step.
It's the only way the next step is possible. Without CAS, the data would have been too messy, too fragmented, too localized to ever support national, let alone global, virtual sales.
And that next step came just a year later, 1998. They introduced remote internet bidding.
Which was revolutionary. I mean, the industry standard was you show up on a Tuesday morning, you walk the lot, you bid in person. The physical presence of the buyer was mandatory.
But internet bidding just shatters those barriers, both geographic and time.
Think about the economics of it. If you have a specific high-value totaled car, let's say a wrecked Porsche, in a small market like Montana.
The number of local buyers willing to pay top dollar for that is tiny, maybe one or two.
Right. But suddenly, with internet bidding, that exact same car is visible to a specialist dismantler in Dubai or a parts broker in Poland who might pay a huge premium for one specific component off that car.
It's the classic platform effect, enabled by technology.
Absolutely. It instantly expanded the buyer pool from regional to global, and the immediate result, the primary benefit for Copart's clients, is a much higher sale price for the seller.
The insurance companies.
Exactly. A higher final sale price for that totaled car means a lower net loss for the insurer on that claim. And that is the ultimate key to getting and keeping those big national contracts. The better your platform performs, the more inventory they send you.
But in 1998, they're probably just using third-party internet software.
Yeah.
Right? Relying on existing infrastructure. That feels like a vulnerability.
It was. And as internet bidding grew and became more central to their business, they realized they needed to control the entire experience. The user interface, the data, the intellectual property.
So they built their own.
In 2003, they implemented their own proprietary, internally developed online auction platform, VB2.
VB2. Virtual Bidding 2.
And this was the true game changer. This is where they perfected the live but purely virtual auction experience. It opened the entire sales process to their registered buyers, their members, and sellers all over the world 24/7.
It basically took their 100-plus physical yards and plugged them into a single global interface.
Seamlessly. They became distributed inventory centers, all accessible from one website.
And this brings us to what might be the most pivotal, most radical moment in the whole story, the point of no return.
It's where they showed just this unbelievable confidence in their own technology and their strategic vision.
They decided to get rid of live physical auctions entirely.
The operational risk was immense. In fiscal year 2004, they discontinued all live physical auctions in North America.
Let's just put that in perspective.
Yeah.
It's like a real estate company deciding to sell all their houses through a website that's only 5 years old without ever letting anyone visit in person again.
It's an unprecedented move. They basically told a huge chunk of their buyer base, the old school guys, that they had to switch to digital or they were out.
They weren't testing the waters. They dove in head first.
And then they doubled down. In fiscal year 2008, they did the same thing in the UK. Discontinued all live auctions there, too.
The implication is just staggering. Copart was now selling millions of vehicles exclusively through their own online platform. They created the first completely online auction model in the industry.
And in doing so, they forced every single one of their competitors globally to stop and completely reassess their own business models.
That risk, it must have delivered some huge reward, right? Why do it?
Unparalleled efficiency by just eliminating the physical auction infrastructure, the auctioneer, the staff to manage the crowd, the overhead of hosting hundreds of people on site. They slashed their operational costs.
And I imagine they could hold auctions more often.
Way more often. They could move from maybe 1 or 2 physical auctions a week at a given yard to near continuous online sales. That speed of getting rid of the inventory is critical for the sellers. A car sitting on a lot is a depreciating asset that costs money to store.
Okay, but I want to push back on something here because this has to have been a point of massive friction. The 2004 decision to abandon physical inspection and bidding, it must have faced huge resistance from their core customers, the veteran dismantlers.
The guy's used to kicking the tires.
Exactly. How did Copart manage the risk of just alienating their entire buyer base?
It's a vital question, and they tackled it in 2 main ways: information superiority and financial necessity.
Okay, what do you mean by information superiority?
Their CAS system allowed them to provide way more data online than you could get in person. High-resolution digital images from every angle, detailed condition reports, guaranteed information about the vehicle's title status and location. They essentially digitized the inspection process to a degree that was better than being there.
And the financial necessity part.
Well, once they had those big national insurance contracts locked up, the inventory, the critical supply stream of cars, was flowing almost exclusively through their platform. So if you were a dismantler and you needed a consistent, high volume of cars to run your business,
You had no choice.
you had no choice. You had to learn to use VB2 because the product you needed to buy simply wasn't being sold physically anywhere else anymore.
They controlled the supply. So technology is always moving, and by 2013, the web had changed again. Mobile was becoming huge.
Right, and Copart knew that VB2, as powerful as it was starting to show its age, especially in its architecture. So in 2013, they launched the next generation, VB3.
And VB3 was more than just a new look. It was a complete replatforming, right? Designed for global scale.
Totally. The older systems, including VB2, they often relied on these clunky plugins, like Flash or old Java applets, to handle the real-time bidding.
I remember those. They were a nightmare. Always needing updates, creating security risks.
And they were a massive bottleneck for global users with different browsers or slower connections. VB3 got rid of all of that. It used modern web standards, it supported all the latest browsers natively, and crucially, it was built from the ground up for mobile.
Which is essential now. Their buyer base is increasingly global and mobile first. A dismantler in Germany or a parts broker in Brazil needs to be able to place a bid from their smartphone reliably.
VB3 made that possible. It overcame the issues like latency and bandwidth that plagued the earlier versions.
And let's just emphasize the proprietary nature of this. This isn't off-the-shelf software.
Not at all. Copart now sells over 1 million vehicles every single year using their patented VB3 technology. And that patent isn't just for the website's design. It covers their unique methodology for running these huge, complex virtual salvage auctions.
So they literally own the engine that revolutionized their own industry.
They do. Okay, so we've established the physical growth and the proprietary digital engine. Now let's look at the current scope of their operations and, the nuts and bolts of how they generate that $4.65 billion in annual revenue.
Right. We started with 4 locations in Northern California. Where are we today? Even though the sales are all online, that physical footprint is still massive and absolutely necessary.
It's the backbone. Today, Copart maintains over 200 physical locations around the world.
200. And the scale of the inventory they hold is it's hard to even visualize.
It is. Those 200 locations house more than 10,000 acres of vehicle inventory.
10,000 acres.
To put that into perspective, that's thousands and thousands of football fields just dedicated to storing wrecked and wholesale cars that are waiting to be processed, titled, and sold online.
That land is the physical manifestation of the entire insurance industry's total loss problem. And Copart manages it.
And optimizes it. And because the U.S. digital model works so well, international expansion was the obvious next step.
Their first move outside North America was Canada in 2003, right? Testing the VB2 tech.
Right, and that Canadian test proved the model was portable. It could work anywhere. So by 2007, they expanded overseas to the United Kingdom.
Which is a very different market, highly regulated, high-volume insurance market.
And that UK operation was so crucial. It gave them the blueprint for how to deal with complex international regulations and title laws, which are often a huge barrier when you're trying to export salvage vehicles.
And then, starting around 2012, the sources show this rapid, calculated global push into all these diverse markets.
And it wasn't scattershot. It was very strategic. They expanded into places where vehicle density was high and logistical coordination was complex.
So where did they go?
They moved into the United Arab Emirates, which is a massive global hub for re-exporting vehicles. Brazil, a huge internal market. They went into Bahrain, Oman, Spain, Ireland, Germany.
That diversity is fascinating. It really highlights that the core business model, totaled cars, sold quickly on an online platform. It's universally applicable.
It doesn't matter what the local road laws are or the salvage regulations. The global platform adds value everywhere.
And that expansion strategy is still a mix of building new locations and buying existing ones.
Exactly. They still use strategic acquisitions to get immediate market share. For example, in 2018, they moved into Finland by acquiring the local leader, a company called Automotive, or AVK.
So today, they're providing services in 11 countries total, all managed and centralized through their corporate headquarters in Dallas.
And that headquarters move in 2012 is worth mentioning. They moved from Fairfield, California to Dallas, Texas. The new Copart Tower, 53,000 square feet of office space. It really cemented Dallas as the central hub for their tech, their logistics, and their global governance.
So beyond the main Copart brand and the VB3 platform, they've also built up this portfolio of specialized brands to capture every single corner of the market.
Right. They want to make sure no vehicle type or sourcing channel gets ignored. So that portfolio includes brands like Crash Toys, which is specifically for motorcycles and recreational vehicles.
So wrecked RVs, jet skis, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And Drive Auto Auctions, which handles clean title or dealership trade-in vehicles. And in 2017, they made a critical acquisition buying National Powersport Auctions, or NPA, which cemented their dominance in things like snowmobiles, ATVs, and watercraft.
And one of the most interesting brands, I think, is cashforcars.com.
That one's really smart. It lets them source inventory directly from you, the consumer. They'll just buy your old or unwanted car for cash.
Which expands their inventory sources way beyond their main institutional clients, the insurance companies.
And that consumer brand has been a big part of their international strategy. They launched it in Canada in 2018, Germany in 2019, the UK in 2020. It's a way to keep inventory flowing, even if institutional contracts shift.
But the real embedded value for their big clients, the insurers, has to be the ancillary services they offer.
Oh, absolutely. Copart is a complete outsourced solution for salvage recovery. They offer these complex value-add services that plug directly into the insurance company's claims workflow.
And these are not trivial things. They are major friction reducers.
Right. They include providing transport for the vehicle from the scene of the accident to their storage lot, a logistical nightmare that Copart's network just handles. And maybe most importantly, they assist with vehicle title processing.
That title processing piece, it's so easy to overlook, but it's a legal and regulatory labyrinth.
It is. When an insurer totals a car, the title has to be meticulously transferred and reclassified as salvage, total loss, sometimes junk. And every state, every country has different rules, different paperwork, different timelines.
And Copart manages all of that compliance for millions of transactions a year,
ensuring that asset can be legally sold and exported anywhere in the world. And finally, they provide sale pricing estimates. This feeds crucial data back to the insurer, helping them accurately calculate their loss and close out the claim. It makes Copart indispensable.
So let's get into the mechanics of that $4.65 billion revenue stream. If we connect all this back to the money, where does the bulk of their income actually come from?
This is the classic digital platform economy model. Copart gets most of its revenue, over 80%, from service fees. Fees for using their online auction platform.
So that confirms it. They're fundamentally a technology and logistics platform provider. Their value is in enabling the transaction, not just selling the asset.
They're monetizing the efficiency of the transaction itself. And that fee structure has two sides: seller fees and buyer fees.
So the seller fees are charged to the insurance company.
Right, for all those services: storage, logistics, title processing, and access to the global auction. And the insurer is happy to pay that fee because Copart's global buyer pool gets them a much higher price for the salvage car than a local auction ever could.
So they get a better net return even after the fee.
Exactly. And then the buyer fees are charged to the dismantlers and the resellers for access to that incredible global inventory.
And those fees cover the platform, the tech, the bidding software, and all the documentation needed for cross-border shipping.
Buyers pay that premium for guaranteed, high-volume, efficiently categorized inventory from one single reliable source.
What about the other 20% of revenue?
That secondary stream comes from the actual sale of vehicles that Copart takes direct ownership of, usually through their consumer-facing brands like cashforcars.com, the traditional buy and resell model.
Now, even though they're a global company, the financial engine is still primarily American, isn't it?
Very much so. The sources show that about 88% of their service fee revenue and 63% of their vehicle sales revenue comes from right here in the United States. International growth is the future, but domestic dominance funds everything.
And finally, let's just look at the two sides of that platform. The sellers are mostly the insurance companies with total loss vehicles. Who are the buyers? Who is providing all this liquidity?
The largest single group of purchasers buying cars in Copart's auctions are vehicle dismantlers.
And that's a key point. That connects Copart directly to the circular economy.
It does. These buyers aren't just crushing the cars, they're looking for specific components: body parts, engines, transmissions, repairable vehicles for export. Copart isn't just selling scrap, it's facilitating the highly efficient global recycling and reuse of automotive parts, maximizing the economic life of everything.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize this whole journey.
Mhm.
We've charted the path from a single salvage lot in Vallejo, California in 1982,
Through aggressive acquisition, a key IPO.
all the way to becoming a multi-billion-dollar tech and asset company listed on the S&P 500.
And that first phase was all about physical scale and standardizing the logistics. The IPO funded those key acquisitions, like NER, that gave them the national footprint of 100 locations, that allowed them to control the inventory flow through the national insurance contracts.
They built a supply chain first, but the real leverage, the thing that created this massive valuation, was the technology, the foundational CAS system, remote bidding in '98.
And of course, that decisive, high-risk switch to their own VB2 and now VB3 platforms. The decision to just abandon all live auctions and go 100% online, that was the pivot that turned their national physical network into a global high-liquidity marketplace.
The so what here isn't just that they got big. It's about the specific economic problem they solved.
I think so too. Their online auction model took these previously illiquid regional assets totaled cars that were hard to sell and made them instantly available to a global pool of buyers.
And that huge infusion of global demand into a localized supply chain just drives up the price. It drives up the residual value of that salvage car.
Creating massive efficiency for the entire auto insurance and recycling industries all over the world.
And the fact that they're in major indices like the S&P 500 just confirms that Wall Street gets it. They see the technology platform as the real source of value.
Right. They reduced friction, they increased the speed of disposition, and they engineered global liquidity for millions of distressed physical assets. They became a mission-critical utility for the insurance industry.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to think about. Consider the vast, often unseen impact of this kind of digital logistics infrastructure on financial stability.
The complex system that Copart built to handle these physical assets at the end of their life. It's fundamental to how things work.
Their ability to process millions of total loss vehicles quickly and transparently online, converting them into cash for global buyers, that isn't just a good business story. It's a fundamental mechanism that actually underpins the viability and the cost of auto insurance for all of us.
That's the real takeaway. Without that digital efficiency and asset recovery, the premium that you pay for your car insurance would most certainly be significantly higher.